Projection is the shadow's favorite trick. The traits you despise out there, are they really theirs, or the parts of you you've buried alive? Jung warned, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Yet you keep pointing outward, because looking within would shatter the story you tell about who you are. That anger, that judgment, it isn't random. It's a mirror. And the question is uncomfortable. Are you brave enough to face the reflection, or will you keep fighting yourself in other people? What you react to most intensely in others often reveals a disowned part of yourself seeking recognition. There is a peculiar sharpness to certain judgments you make, a kind of emotional heat that feels disproportionate to the situation, and that heat is rarely about the other person alone. Carl Jung wrote, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And this is not poetic exaggeration, but a psychological mechanism called projection. When you bury traits you consider unacceptable anger, selfishness, insecurity, they do not disappear. They relocate into the unconscious, where they wait for a mirror. Then someone walks into your life and displays that very trait, and suddenly you feel justified in your outrage. But what you are really reacting to is the part of you that never got permission to exist. Think about the coworker whose arrogance infuriates you. Are you certain you have never suppressed your own desire to be recognized or admired? Or the person you label as lazy, have you denied your own exhaustion or need for rest? The Stoics remind you to focus on what is within your control, and your reactions are entirely yours to examine. A simple exercise. The next time you feel triggered, pause and ask, where does this live in me? Write down the trait you condemn, then list moments, however small, when you've embodied it. This is not about self-condemnation, but integration. When you acknowledge these traits, they lose their need to shout through others. The intensity softens, and in its place, you gain clarity. You stop being a puppet of unconscious reactions and begin the work of individuation, becoming whole rather than fragmented. Projection allows you to avoid responsibility by turning your inner conflict into an external enemy. It is a clever defense, almost elegant in how it protects your self-image. Because if the flaw exists out there, you never have to confront it within. You can point, judge, criticize, and feel morally superior, all while remaining blind to your own contradictions. Epictetus said, if anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults. Else he would not have mentioned these alone. There is humility in this perspective. A willingness to admit that you are not as clean as your judgments suggest. When you project, you create villains out of people who are simply expressing what you have repressed. The danger is that this keeps you stagnant. Growth requires ownership, and projection is the opposite of ownership. It is the mind's way of outsourcing discomfort. Notice how easy it is to criticize dishonesty in others while ignoring your own subtle manipulations, or to condemn anger while suppressing your own resentment until it leaks out sideways. A practical step, when you catch yourself labeling someone harshly, rephrase the judgment as a question. In what way might I do this too? Sit with the discomfort instead of escaping it. This is where Stoic discipline meets Jungian insight. You reclaim your agency by pulling the projection back inward. The enemy dissolves, and in its place, you find a part of yourself asking to be understood rather than exiled. The traits you despise most are often the ones you were taught were unacceptable to express. As a child, you learned quickly which parts of you were rewarded and which were rejected. Maybe anger was labeled as disrespect, confidence was called arrogance, or vulnerability was seen as weakness. So you adapted. You trimmed yourself down into something more acceptable, more digestible for others. But the parts you cut away did not vanish. They became your shadow. Jung described the shadow as the thing a person has no wish to be, and yet it remains alive within you, influencing your perceptions in subtle but powerful ways. This is why certain people seem to provoke you without clear reason. They are expressing the very traits you were forbidden to embody. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Whenever you are offended at someone's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. This is not a call to shame yourself, but to understand your conditioning." Imagine someone who grew up being told not to be selfish. As an adult, they may become overly self-sacrificing, yet feel intense resentment toward those who prioritize themselves. That resentment is the shadow demanding balance. A journaling prompt for you. Write down 3 traits you strongly dislike in others, then reflect on when you were discouraged from expressing those traits. Ask yourself, what would a healthy version of this look like in me? Because the goal is not to become what you hate, but to integrate its constructive form. Your shadow is not your enemy, it is a neglected part of your psyche waiting to be reclaimed with maturity and awareness. Your moral judgments often mask unintegrated desires that you secretly envy or fear. There is a quiet envy that hides beneath harsh criticism, a tension between what you allow yourself to be and what you secretly wish you could express. When you see someone living boldly, speaking freely, or taking what they want, your reaction may not be admiration, but disdain. You call them reckless, selfish, or inappropriate, but beneath that judgment is often a disowned longing. Seneca observed, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality, and much of that suffering comes from denying your own nature while condemning it in others." The shadow does not only contain dark traits, it also holds your unlived potential, your assertiveness, creativity, sensuality, ambition. When these remain unintegrated, they appear externally as people you criticize or even despise. Consider the person who judges others for seeking attention. Could it be that they themselves crave recognition but feel unworthy of it? Or the one who condemns risk-takers, have they buried their own desire for freedom under layers of caution? A powerful exercise. Identify someone you strongly judge. Then ask, what are they allowing themselves that I am not? This question can be uncomfortable, even unsettling, but it opens a door. The Stoic idea of amor fati, embracing your fate, includes embracing your full nature, not just the socially acceptable parts. When you integrate these desires consciously, they stop controlling you unconsciously. Your judgments soften, and your life expands. Integrating your shadow dissolves projection and transforms judgment into understanding. When you begin to recognize your projections, something subtle but profound shifts. You stop seeing the world as a battlefield of right and wrong, and start seeing it as a mirror of human complexity. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires facing and integrating the shadow rather than denying it. This does not mean acting out every impulse, but acknowledging that those impulses exist within you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Your triggers are not obstacles. They are entry points into self-awareness. When someone irritates you, instead of tightening into judgment, you can soften into curiosity. What is this showing me about myself?" Over time, this practice builds a kind of inner stability. You are less reactive, less easily offended, because you are no longer at war with your own nature. A practical integration practice. At the end of each day, reflect on moments when you felt strong judgment. Write them down, then explore what they reveal about your inner world. Ask, what part of me is being reflected here? And how can I express this trait in a healthy, conscious way? As you do this consistently, something remarkable happens. You develop compassion, not just for others, but for yourself. The shadow loses its grip, projection fades, and you move closer to wholeness. You no longer need to hate in others what you refuse to see within, because you have finally chosen to see it.